Hello, all you beautiful people out there, and welcome to my channel, especially if you're here for the first time. Welcome. I hope you subscribe, and I hope you enjoy this show. This is Uncovering Creationist Lies Part 2. Make sure you watch Part 1 first. And just because I chose to call this one Uncovering Creationist Lies over all the other videos I've made, don't be fooled, because they lie all the goddamn time. And by the way, you might want to bring your snacks and get a drink, because you're probably going to need them. While you're thinking about it, hit that subscribe button, and if you already know you like my videos, why don't you leave a like? If not, then you can like at the end if you want to. No pressure. So anyway, let's get on with the creationist lies and the stupid.
Each cell is a miniaturized city performing the complex functions required for life to exist. The cell membrane is self-repairing and consists of special proteins that monitor what is outside of the cell, as well as select which molecules are allowed to enter. These proteins act as pumping stations, controlling the import of nutrients and the export of waste materials. Inside the cell, we find staggering complexity. For example, the endoplasmic reticulum is a transportation network with protein-producing factories called ribosomes. The ribosomes produce many types of specific proteins, while the ER channels them to precise locations. The Golgi bodies transport proteins to the exterior membrane, while lysosomes act as digestive organs that break down and recycle larger molecules into particles the cell can use. The mitochondria are the power plants of the cell, producing the fuel that the cell consumes. The nucleus contains the data center, which governs cell activity. Inside the nucleus, we find the chromosomes, which contain the DNA molecule that functions as a library and contains all the coded information needed for life. Billions of instructions are coded on this error-detecting and error-correcting self-replicating molecule. Only if all of these structures were created simultaneously could a cell function.
No, that's wrong. 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 No, that's wrong.
Are you kidding me? You have a biochemist, and you're wondering how the cell could evolve? For fuck's sake, I was a psychology major, and I know that, because there's a lot of biology in psychology. Come on, get it together. The first life on Earth were not cells. I repeat, were not cells. They were composed of community metabolism and found each other useful. I can't believe that you guys think that we think that cells just magically popped into existence without any precursors. But then you believe an elephant popped into existence without precursors, so I'm not really surprised. So I'm going to have to split up my explanation of the cell, this time not because of copyright strike, but just because it would take too long to download from the program that I am using, so please bear with me. I actually don't give a goddamn what order they go in, so I'm going to go in my own order. Generally because I want to go in the order in which scientists think the cell actually evolved, and of course it didn't evolve all at once. So as most of you know, cellular life evolved around 3.5 billion years ago, not as eukaryotes as these idiots think, but as primitive bacteria called prokaryotes, where the chromosome was just lying within the cell. Within a billion years, these bacteria had evolved into multiple types of bacteria, including fermenting anaerobic archaeobacteria, photosynthetic cyanobacteria, which produced oxygen, and aerobic bacteria that used oxygen. Unlike prokaryotes, eukaryotic DNA is contained within a nucleus, and these first emerged about 2 billion years ago. They also contain a cytoskeleton, cytoplasm, which is enveloped by the cell membrane, various organelles, and mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. Note that prokaryotes don't have mitochondria. In fact, we still have prokaryotes today, and we even have prokaryotes in our body which are beneficial to us. So, what was that about cells not being able to live without the mitochondrial powerhouse of the cell again? You liars.
Your Honor, I object!
And why is that, Mr. Reed?
Because it's devastating to my case!
Overruled.
Good call!
So the prevalent theory on how life started on Earth was it was an RNA world first. Then DNA took over because DNA is a more stable molecule than RNA. And we know that DNA was around before prokaryotes because prokaryotes have DNA. I'm not going to address DNA and RNA unless they address it. Because this is about the evolution of cells. So, if you want to know that stuff, go look it up for yourself. The most prominent theory explaining cell evolution is serial endosymbiosis, or things that beneficially live together. In the 1920s, this theory was rejected, but in 1967, Margulis resurrected it. The reason was geneticists' observations of cytoplasmic genes, those found outside the nucleus. He also proposed that organelles had a bacterial origin, which was the original source of extranuclear genes. According to this theory, Archaeobacterium, because they lacked a rigid cell wall, were quote-unquote invaded, so to speak, with metal spirochetes, which is another form of bacteria, to form the first eukaryotic cell. Then the Archaeobacteria enclosed its DNA within a double-membrane nucleus, while the spirochetes ultimately gave rise to microtubules. Over time, this new cell type engulfed anaerobic bacteria, which was maintained separately in a vesicle within the host cell. This is what we now call the mitochondria. Over time, mitochondria transferred some of their genes to the host cell, making them dependent on the host cell, while some nucleated cells made a symbiotic relationship with intracellular cyanobacteria, leading to photosynthetic eukaryotes. At first, this theory was not well accepted, but many, many more experiments have led to the acceptance.
I think probably the weakest link in all of evolution theory is the idea of the origin of life from non-living chemicals. It's probably easier to get from a cell to a person than it is to get from chemicals to life. The gap there is just so incredibly large. I'm convinced that life is so complicated, so complex, so intricately engineered that wherever life exists, God created it. It could not have come by natural processes. Life comes from a creator. And that creator tells us that he created life here on earth. Here we see it, unimaginably complex. It must have been created.
I believe humans evolved to where we are today from single-celled organisms based on the theory of Darwinism and natural selection. I don't think that there was any sort of divine intervention.
I believe evolution is pretty much a proven theory.
I don't believe in a higher order. Just because the fact that I haven't seen any, proof or, concrete evidence of that, and until somebody shows me, that there is, then I'm going to have an aversion to organized religion, and I'm going to stay on the basis of chemical evolution.
No life is simple, and all life shows the handiwork of a designer. Scientists know this, yet many believe in chemical evolution rather than be accountable to the Creator God of the Bible. Next, we will examine the evolutionary view that simple life has evolved into complex life.
Arguing science versus religion can be like repeating one of Abbott and Costello's old routines, because religious extremists use a different lexicon than rational academics do. We're saying the same words, but with different meanings, and they're equivocating multiple meanings, all of which may be wrong. So we just talk past each other as if neither understands why the other doesn't get it. Now, some of this is by design, to maintain a misunderstanding necessary to preserve a pretend position.
So I put in a clip of Aaron Ra talking about deliberately misunderstanding and mixing up terms, because to tell you the honest truth, I get tired of it, Now, regular Christians usually aren't aware of it. And what I mean by regular Christians are the non-apologist Christians that sit in the pews and are just, brainwashed. They don't really know the difference. But the apologists and the pastors, they do. And they are liars, and I am calling them out on it. How many times do we have to tell you people that abiogenesis is not part of evolution? Abiogenesis happened before evolution could occur. Jesus fucking Christ. Pay attention for once in your life. And that right there is your problem. You think arrogantly that you have all the answers. And all the answers are God, 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 God. You don't think for 1 minute that maybe, just maybe, this all came about by naturalistic means. So basically, you're using the argument from design. Things are too complex to have come about naturalistically. Okay, I'll play your game. If things are too complex to come about naturalistically, where did God come from? Because it's quite evident to me that if you're going to say that things are too complex to come about naturalistically, that means that the creator who made these things is even more complex and needed a bigger creator. Nice going, asshole. You just stepped into the problem of infinite regression. I just love it when Christians do that. Oh, and by the way, just because there might be a creator does not mean that it is the God of the Bible. There are plenty of other gods out there. So even if you did manage to prove that the universe was created, your job's still not done. It doesn't do what you think it does. You still have to prove it was your God and not anybody else's. One more thing before I throw it back to these assholes. We see evolution happening. Just because you prefer to call it microevolution does not mean that evolution does not happen. You're just painting yourself into a corner.
Darwin's idea that everything, every living thing on the earth eventually could be traced back to a common ancestor.
The thing that Darwinists believe is that life, that all the species on Earth have evolved by a process of spontaneous genetic mutation, that's a spontaneous change in the DNA which is the program for every living thing, coupled with natural selection, the survival of the fittest. The extraordinary thing is that although the theory has been pretty well accepted universally for over a century now, there is absolutely no direct evidence to support it at all.
Darwin made a big deal about the fact that there were various sizes of finches, small, large, medium-sized finches. He made a big deal of the fact that there were finches with large beaks, thick beaks, long beaks, and thin beaks. Darwin assumed that these beaks were evidence of evolution. In fact, these beaks were the result of the genetic variability that already existed in the population. If you take two medium finches with medium-sized beaks and you breed them, you will get some finches with small beaks and some finches with larger beaks. Over time, as these finches spread out into the various environments, certain beak sizes would be favored in certain environments, and therefore they would become the predominant type. But the point is the capability to produce the small beaks, the medium beaks, and the large beaks was already in the parent population of the Galapagos finches, and it was simply the environmental differences that allowed them to be expressed. It was not the creation of any new and unique information.
Okay, we've already got a problem here, and they know it. They're lying to you because they know that there's a problem. Darwin never said anything about genetics. He didn't know anything about genetics. His theory was natural selection. He didn't know where this natural selection selected from, but he knew natural selection was in place. And those creationists just admitted that natural selection happens. It wasn't until Geiger Mendel that genetics started to become known, and that's where we end up with our current theory of evolution: natural selection plus genetic mutation equals evolution. And you can call it variation all you want, but it's still evolution. So if I'm hearing this correctly, the creationists are saying that all the variation in everything was already there. Does that mean that Adam was blonde one day, red another day, and brown another day? Don't forget black. And that's just the hair color. What about smooth hair versus kinky hair versus curly hair? What about eye color? Were his eyes brown one day and blue the next day and albino the next day and green the next? Was one eye one color and another color one day, and then going through all those permutations and then going opposite for those permutations? And was he white one day and Asian another day and black another day? Now, if that little rant didn't show you how ridiculous this variation was already in the genetic code argument is, I don't know what will show you how ridiculous this argument is, because it is ridiculous. But some, like John Morris Pendleton, go even farther in saying that if mutations contribute to anything, they're just a bunch of quote-unquote freaks. His word, not mine. Really? Just quote-unquote a bunch of freaks that wouldn't last anyway? In the past few years, we've seen mutations that protect against heart attack, that protect against fat storage. That's what you call a freak, a quote-unquote freak? Well, you know what, John? If that's what you call a quote-unquote freak, you can sign me up because I want protection from a heart attack. And I am fat, so I would love not to starve fat. Thank you very much. But you know what? I'm confused about why you're still arguing about this because you already accept evolution. You accept natural selection happens. You accept that genetic mutation happens, even if you call it variation.
Fossils have been collected for hundreds of years, for centuries. There are billions of fossils in every university and every museum in the world. But there are no intermediate species. You look at one strata and you find one kind of fossil. You look at the strata above it, you find a different kind of fossil. What you don't find is a gradual change.
One of the greatest evidences for creation is found in the fossil record. For example, in the so-called Cambrian rocks, we find fossils of a vast array of very complex invertebrates: clams, snails, jellyfish, worms, brachiopods, trilobites, and many other very complex invertebrates. But nowhere on the face of this earth has anyone found fossilized ancestor to a single one of those complex invertebrates. Now that fact alone demolishes the theory of evolution.
Oh my god, the crocodile argument. Are you fucking kidding me? Everybody knows. And you're supposed to be educated, quote unquote educated. And yeah, we see how well you're educated now, don't we? But everybody knows that crocodiles don't exist, you idiots. The only people saying we should find quote unquote crocodiles are you fucking idiots. People who know their evolutionary stuff know that no such thing exists. I will point you to a living intermediate. We don't find a gradual change. Then what the fuck do you call the horse evolution, you bigoted ass? We can see the progression of the horses from one layer to the next. That's called evolution, you idiot. As promised, I will give you an example of a living intermediary called the African lungfish. Unlike other fish, lungfish don't have the typical secondary vessels. Instead, they have a lymphatic system similar to those found in tetrapods. Lungfish have been around since the Devonian, though not in current form. They have both gills and lungs, meaning that such an intermediary has been found in the fossil record and still exists today. So, what was that about not finding any intermediaries in the fossil record? And why do they exist today? So, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You're surprised that in Cambrian rock we find complex multicellular organisms. First of all, nobody said that multicellular organisms were not complex. Second of all, the building blocks of life were already in place at the end of the Precambrian, which started at 4.54 billion years ago and ended 540 million years ago. You idiot. Just by saying the Cambrian rock, you admit that the Earth is older than 6,000 years. One more observation before I leave it alone for today because this this episode really has enough stupid in it. Okay, so you just said there were trilobites and multi-celled organisms in the Cambrian rock. And as I've already just explained, the life had started in the Precambrian, so I don't know why you're surprised by that. But I do have to say, why don't we find dogs with trilobites? Don't you think that's a bit odd? I mean, if creationism is true, shouldn't we find dogs with the trilobites? Well, guys, this video didn't contain anything about amino acids, basically because nobody brought it up this time. By the way, I do love debunks, but I can only take so much at a time, you know? So that's why they only come out once a week. Anyway, um, yeah. I hope you realize by now that creationists, particularly young earth creationists, are so desperate to keep their sheeple in their little cult so that they can keep money that they will lie through their teeth about anything. In fact, that's why I started Christianity Debunks. My channel originally started as a way of seeing how religion began because that's, what I'm interested in. And I will get back to that. But these Christianity debunks, they're really, really important. If you are a Christian, I hope you can see that your pastors really don't care about you. All they care about is making money. Okay? So do what you want, but go ahead and research Christianity. It's okay. It is not heretical in any way. And I am not trying to lie to you. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to deconvert you from Christianity. I'm trying to get the truth out there. If you like what I do, please subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and leave a comment down below as it helps the algorithm. If you like what I do for real, you can become a member for as little as 99 cents a month. You get custom emojis as well as early access to these debunks. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you did. If you already have, you know, please consider becoming a member. Have a nice rest of your day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will talk to you later. Bye. Like I said, this really wasn't a part two, mainly because nobody brought up amino acids this time. You can research them for yourself if you want to. But it is the last debunk of this particular video. So next time gonna be I don't know what it's gonna be.